Hello.
Hello. Hi, Deana. How are you?
How are you? Very good, thanks. And you?
Yeah, well, I'm in Spain at the moment.
Oh, it must be hot there.
Yeah, it is. Yes, very. But
It's
enjoyable.
very hot here too. Hello, everyone.
Hi,
It's
Lynn.
John.
Hi, Lynn. Hi.
32
everybody.
degrees in my living room.
I have only 28.
Oh, you've only 28. Oh, that's good. Great. Good. Just for the logistics, I'll literally just introduce Muvon and then the rest. I don't want to waste time on me. So we'll just hand over straight to you. I'm not sure who's going to speak first.
Deana.
Deana.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Steve and then John. Is that right?
Yeah,
No.
Steve had to, so John will be there for the Q&A. So I'll make the presentation like in about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And spend also about a clinical trial some time. And then we can have an open discussion with the audience.
Okay. I tried to put out some more social media posts today in between everything else. As I say, at the moment, I'm a full-time caregiver here. That's sort of trying to do that and work is, well, it's what it is. But
One request. Will this be recorded?
yes,
Yes,
on
it will be.
demand later.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That's the
Just
idea.
looking where I can share my screen, or at least make your host as well. But you can share screen. Everybody can now.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, great.
Picked up. Seems to work.
Yes. Just to give a little bit of feedback, this year, I think because we've gone the extra mile, we're getting an awful lot of feedback, and it may not be directly in the webinars themselves, but via and to all corners of the earth, which is good. The idea is to have this week as a awareness raising week, and we're now trying to bring everyone into focus, that we don't have all bits of weeks here and bits of weeks there. If everyone aligns with this week, that should be the way forward.
But I see the major players on the market are celebrating this week. So I think you're in the right
You've
way.
seen that. Yeah, exactly. They are. The only thing is, it's a bit of a time squeeze, but anyway, it'll work. It's fine as long as we get the messages across. That's the main thing. I had some very interesting discussions yesterday with a major pharma company who is very likely to join the journey, so to speak. So that's looking good, hopefully. And I did a big ask, John.
Thank you.
Followed your advice.
Thank you. That's great. Let me know how I can help.
Yeah, you will. As I say, I'll get back to you, as I mentioned in my WhatsApp this morning. I'll switch me off for a minute. I shouldn't worry if we don't get too many people on the actual call, because with it being recorded, it's available later, and often people look at a later
And I
date.
think for our discussion, you do a push anyway to your whole community, right?
Which we will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just waiting a couple of minutes for this.
Just playing with my screen. It's too weird. Sorry about that.
Are you guys all going to the ICS in Toronto? I suppose you are.
No.
No,
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 I'm
we have
debating
quite a
very
lot to
much
do
whether
now.
to go or not at the moment.
So Luca, over to you, and John have joined the call. Are they from earlier?
According to me, we've got 2 minutes to past. But that's correct. Very glad that we've actually the opportunity to
Give me, okay, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to this our second webinar in the World Continence Week 23 series of webinars, which we're quite excited about because we've got quite a range of different types of people who've actually come to join and to help raise awareness of continence issues across the globe and so on. Now, we've not come to listen to me. That's the last thing we want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce immediately, and then they can introduce a little bit more about themselves. We've got Deana, we've got Steve, and we've got John from Muvon Therapeutics. And rather than my giving away all the secrets, Deana, I think I'm going to leave it to you to explain what Muvon Therapeutics is about and the exciting investigations you're doing there in Switzerland. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lynn, and thank you for the pleasure of giving us this opportunity to present during the World Incontinence Week. We are very happy to be here. I'm today with John, who is leading our medical affairs from the US, so over the ocean. And I'm Deana Mohr, co-founder and CEO of Muvon Therapeutics. We at Muvon are developing a therapy that helps people control their life. And now I would like to share my screen and start with some slides that I've prepared. So what we do at Muvon is we have developed platform technology for skeletal muscle regeneration. How it works is normally skeletal muscle can regenerate quite well. How it works is that upon injury, a special subtype of cells called muscle precursor cells start proliferating, meaning that they enlarge their number, and at some point they start differentiating, meaning they change their form and they'll start fusing and eventually at the end form functional contracting muscle fibers. This works normally, but with age, this function starts decreasing, both due to the quality of those cells and also due to their reduction in number. And what we do what we do at Muvon is we take these cells, isolate them, make millions of them, and basically make a natural booster. Here, more exemplified how it works in the practice, we obtain a small muscle biopsy from a healthy muscle. Then we isolate the so-called muscle precursor cells. Then we expand them in culture until we reach the millions of cells that are needed for a therapeutic effect. And at the end, the product is prepared for injection, where it is placed into the damaged muscle. Once injected, the cells start differentiating, forming new muscle fibers, and rebuilding damaged muscle fibers. At the end, we have functional contracting muscle tissue. The benefits of our therapy are various, starting from that we don't use any synthetic materials. It's a very minimally invasive procedure, very low risk, potentially offering a lifetime cure to our patients, and we have already early clinical proof of concept data with our lead indication, which is why we are here, stress urinary incontinence. I'm not going to explain what it is and what causes it. I wanted just to emphasize with this slide that it's officially affecting over 200 million people worldwide, whereas the dark numbers are much, much higher due to the stigma and taboo around this disease. It's the socioeconomic impact is huge, leading up to depression cases, very severe cases, that has made FDA qualified as a serious and debilitating disease in 2020. Now, what we aim at Muvon is helping the patients that have failed the so-called conservative treatments. So those that can be helped by lifestyle modifications or pelvic floor muscle training, physiotherapy. We emphasize that we are taking the patients that fail the conservative treatments and that are unsatisfied with the results, but do not want to undergo invasive surgery. Due to fear of surgery and the currently side effects of it, and sometimes severe adverse events have happened, patients, only 20% of patients do really undergo surgery. So with our therapy, we want to capture initially those 35% that continue living with symptoms due to fear of surgery. And this we could translate over the past decade into a viable regenerative tissue engineering therapy. The results from our phase 1 clinical trial that we completed with 9 patients, and here you see the data from 6 months of follow-up, were very, very good to us, and we could show with 9 patients that we had no serious adverse events, no unexpected adverse events, significantly improved quality of life, and increase in muscle volume and strength in all 9 patients. Of course, the phase 1 was made to show the safety and feasibility of the therapy, but moreover, we included some of the efficacy readout data, which we were very positively surprised that all of them worked in the right direction. Again, to emphasize the benefits of our therapy, that we don't use any synthetic materials, it's super minimally invasive, very low risk, no hindrance to childbirth, and potentially offering a lifetime cure. A bit of a deeper dive into the in our data set on the efficacy side. The paper has been published also in the International Urogynecology Journal, so everyone can read it with more details. Here I would emphasize on 3 readouts. The first one is the urodynamics measurement, where we observed elongation of the functional urethral length under stress in all 9 patients, meaning that there is also functional strength recovery in those patients. Second thing that we analyzed was the MRI, where we checked the sphincter muscle that is holding the bladder closed, and we measured the diameter of the muscle before the treatment and 6 months after the treatment. Here again, we could see and visualize that there was an increase in the muscle volume. Moreover, we could not observe any aberrant tissue formation, and we could not observe any necrosis, showing the additionally also the safety of the therapy. Last but not least was the quality of life of the patients measured by a questionnaire, that we could also see that we have a significant increase in quality of life of our patients. And here are some of the quotes from both physician side and patients, which for our therapy are aligned, unlike for other therapies out there. We could see that the gap that is filled by our therapy is recognized by the MD Society, but also the positive effect and improvement that our therapy had in, here are quotes from 3 from our patients that completed the phase 1 clinical trial. Completely satisfied, no incontinence, improvement of the quality of life. They think that this would break the taboo topic, and a satisfying result went from 5 pads per day to 1. These results motivated us to move forward and to bring this to more patients that could potentially make use of our treatment. And now currently we have an ongoing phase 2 clinical trial. The address is found here in the link muvonstudie.ch, where you can check both in English and German the participation criteria in and exclusion criteria. You can read more information about our ongoing study, where we test a low dose and a high dose of our product. For female stress urinary incontinence, the study is taking place in Switzerland, in Zurich, but patients from surrounding countries are very welcome to join, and they do join. A few details about the study, how it goes. So the study for the patients lasts approximately 8 to 9 months in total, from the first baseline visits for each patient until the biopsy is obtained at visit 2. And then we have the treatment phase, where we just basically check the safety and efficacy of the therapy, the therapeutic effect as it develops over time. And once the treatment phase is over, we go into the post-treatment phase, and we follow the patients up to 6 months in this study. Furthermore, we have so-called long-term follow-up study, where we are collecting the data sets of the patients that have received our therapy for longer periods, up to 5 years, where we collect data on a yearly basis. And if you know someone or yourself are interested in participating, there is a button here, check participation, where you're asked by an AI software a couple of questions, and they, if you're eligible, then the recruitment company is going to connect you. And with this, I would like to have my last slide, where I will end with 2 quotes. The first one is from the EU Commission, where they granted us the first big grant to translate this from an R&D perspective into a clean room product and run a phase 1 clinical trial, that the potential to improve the quality of life of these patients is real. And on the right-hand side, you see a quote from one of our patients in phase 1, completely satisfied, no incontinence. I also no longer need to use pads, a clear improvement of my quality of life and well-being. Thanks a lot. And of course, worth mentioning the great collaboration with the WFYPP that are supporting us on the way. Thanks a lot, and open for questions.
Great. I'll just add, I'm John Coelho. I'm the head of medical affairs for Muvon, based just outside New York City. I hope you enjoyed the presentation by Deana, and she's a passionate scientist and researcher. There is a full team based out of Zurich, largely, that is working very hard on this regenerative platform. And while we're looking at female stress urinary incontinence, of course, while you looked at the clinical measures, which are really important to me in the physician sense, I saw a question come up about the outcomes, which are very important as well, or perhaps more important to the patient. And one can potentially sleep through the night without having to change pads. So the actual pad reduction in this case is very, very important. Typically, phase 1 studies are studies on safety, assessing a platform or a drug in its early phase. This phase 1 was unique in that it also had diseased patients, 9 diseased patients. So we look at this complete response in these 9 patients, improvements, broad improvement in measures, very, constructively. It shows the potential efficacy that's published in the peer-reviewed paper Deana mentioned. And now we're looking at it, 2 experimental doses in a phase 2 study at this point. So I would love to open it up to questions that you may have. And again, our gratitude to our friends, all of you, the patient group, because without you, this would not be the promise of what we can provide to a broader span of patients. Thank you.
May I ask a question? I see that you say about the phase 2 and about patients or people from other areas being able to get involved. Can you say a little bit more about how they can get involved? Because I think they need a little bit more detail on that one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if you open the webpage for our phase 2 clinical trial, there is a short questionnaire with the main in and exclusion criteria that can be answered by the patient themselves. And if at the end of these few questions you are probably eligible, then you are asked to give your email or phone number that is sent then to a patient recruitment company. They are based in Germany, and they are making the additional in and exclusion criteria, some interview, explain how the therapy works, what it means for the patient, how many visits there are, how it is organized, and if there is a mutual willingness to proceed, then the address and your contacts are being given to our coordinator at the University Hospital Zurich, who is then taking care of the first visit organization of the meeting with the surgeons and further discussions of the therapy, and then the journey starts basically. Mm-hmm. With this mode that we have included a partnership with this recruitment company, it's very helpful to reduce also the workload of basically excluding ineligible patients, because we have predefined in exclusion criteria that need to be taken into consideration. And this is giving us the already quite sure eligible patients only.
Yes, thank you, Deana. I think that's key. The how easy is it? People never want difficult stuff. They like to be able to participate, but it must be made relatively easy for them. So that's answered the question basically, and I think that's the kind of information that we need to put out, and we can help with that as well, because I think we can do that via our member organizations, because this is very novel to many people, this kind of tissue engineering and the like, and I think there needs to be a lot more promotion about it. Let's put it that way. So anything we can do to help in that sense, because the phase 2 trial Can we give some timelines on that? What's happening?
So we are currently actively recruiting, so there are still slots open. The recruitment process is going actually quite well on schedule. We are half full, I would say, up to now, and we are aiming at finishing the trial sometimes next year. This is the timeline that we have now.
And there's a question about, the treating urge incontinence, and I just for the broader audience, there is urge incontinence, stress, and functional incontinence, and this is where referral to a urologist, urogyne, is extremely important because they can differentiate between the types of incontinence. Muvon Therapeutics regenerative platform specifically treats stress urinary incontinence. Urge incontinence, which is separate, is caused by a weakening of the detrusor muscle, that is a different muscle near the bladder, and so that is not indicated here. So I just wanted to answer Clara's question.
Mm-hmm.
And Monica brought up our patient organizations involved in the design of the project. Well, we from the very beginning, since I've joined Muvon, patient organizations such as this one and the voice of the patient are exceedingly important in considerations for design. I'll give you a couple of examples. What the work that this organization is doing insofar as emphasizing patient-reported outcomes, bad tests, and what the patient ultimately perceives as the next day benefit are really what are important in driving the narrative in partnerships with leading organizations like the EAU, European Association of Urology. There's the new Office for Patient, with leading urologists, and also LIN, that they have a voice in expressing what efficacy measures should be considered. So these considerations are then taken back to regulatory agencies and access agencies to ensure that they emphasize the right measures. What good is it if there's a functional length increase, but there's no benefit to the patients? So both have to be taken into consideration with great emphasis on the bad tests and what the patient ultimately feels. So yes, there's a great emphasis on patient input early on, which is why we're having this great conversation.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, John. There is another question by Clara. Are you doing the pelvic floors? Can you please mute yourself, please?
Team, if you could mute your phone, thank you.
Yeah, so there was a question whether we are doing pelvic floor assessment for the patients before starting the treatment, as many women suffer from SUI due to birth injuries or lax ligaments in menopause. Can the injection in the sphincter area and sphincter treat them also well? So yes, what we have here is mainly due to the high variability of the starting grade of the incontinence, and each person has its specific anatomical
uniqueness.
Exactly, and especially after childbirth, many things change. And basically the starting point and the weakness of the sphincter is different from patient to patient. That's why for us, it made most sense to measure the baseline of this muscle strength, how the pelvic floor functions, and how strong, for example, there is a cuff test that is done, and some other urodynamic measurements, but also pad tests to check also the volume that is being lost. All these baseline measurements are checked before the treatment, and we do include patients that have a certain that overcome a certain threshold. So we are not aiming at patients that lose 2 drops, because the impact that can have with someone who is, for example, using 5 pads per day is much, much greater. And we have set predefined thresholds so that we can capture those patients that do really need our therapy. As mentioned during the presentation, also those that have failed conservative treatments. And then we check the regeneration, also visual by MRI, after 6 months of the treatment, where we expect the fibers to have restored the function of the sphincter muscle. So yes, actually almost all of our patients are postpartum ladies that come and join our trial. Now regarding the menopause, yes, we don't have these as an exclusion criteria. However, for the moment, for the current trial, we are recruiting women from 18 to 65 years of age, as the benefit on the long term on their quality of life can be greater than if we treat someone that is, for example, at a later stage of the life.
Great. As there's a break in questions, I'll just offer from a medical sense what the standard of care is. So primarily in Europe, one goes through when there's a diagnosis from a urologist or urogyn for stress urinary incontinence based on the extrinsic muscle weakness, then one is normally referred to for physiotherapy for a finite duration, 3 months or so, 6 months. On failure of that, then the patient may be administered what are called bulking agents that are injected into the sphincter, into the urethral area. And these bulking agents only have a temporary fix for 7 to 9 months. And then they work immediately, but then there's a failure rate over the 9 months. Then they have to be re-administered and then perhaps once more, but not more than 3 times. They cannot be provided. And yes, you're correct. There are step aids with vaginal inlays that can help. Thank you, Clara. That's great. Good to have a well-informed audience here. In the event, and in the United States, this is more common, is surgical slings. These have been banned in the UK, in France, and I believe there are discussions in other European countries. They're only administered on clinical trials, but surgical slings are then placed with more invasive procedures to help with managing more acute stress urinary incontinence.
It's not really a question, but yesterday we did our first webinar on stigma and taboo, and we had Professor Francisco Cruz from Portugal speaking, and he came up with some data and figures, which is always very useful. And one of them, this very, very recent, they've done a survey in Europe, postpartum ladies, that within the first 30 days post-childbirth, 40% leak to a larger or lesser extent. So it just gives some idea of the enormity of the problem issue that we're dealing with, and it's our job to try and get these, how should I say, to get far more focus and far more attention for conditions like incontinence, which, as you say, FDA recognizes, and slowly but surely it's trickling through, but excuse the pun, but anyway, that's the idea. So together with the data and the figures, but at the moment you're not particularly targeting postpartum, but that's your sort of, the recruitment is what you're getting at the moment. Is that right?
So for us, it's open between 18 and 65 years of age, but the majority of our patients is in the early 40s that we see coming to our trial.
So how would somebody, let's say, based in France, who's seen and looked at everything on the website and thinks, okay, this is something for me, perhaps, and go through the steps and the stages, but that person, of course, has to come to Zurich at some stage. Yeah,
Correct.
just
So we
take
have,
it from there.
yeah.
Practical
So how it
example.
goes is, as mentioned, they fill up the questionnaire on our website. When they match the in and exclusion criteria, they are contacted then by our recruitment company. Then they have a phone call, and then they are redirected to our study center. As Zurich is a very international city, in our department, the doctors do speak most of the languages that are spoken in Europe and beyond. So there is no language barrier, and moreover, we have.
Sorry, you've frozen for a moment.
Well, I'll keep talking
Yeah,
then.
John.
Yeah. So it's fairly simple. You know, they speak, of course, German and some French, and there are a variety of you know, helpers there who can participate. There is a single principal investigator, but you know, German, Swiss, and some French may be conversant. So that is not an issue. Yeah, Deana, I just finished your comment, so no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. My internet dropped me.
Yeah, and then given the time points of baseline and biopsy extraction and follow-up, you know, they're fairly well spaced apart. And so it would not be very difficult for a patient to who's potentially interested and meets the inclusion criteria published on the site that Deana shared, and maybe we can put that up again. That would also help with them flying to Zurich to visit the investigator and for the initial consult and evaluation.
And moreover, worth mentioning is that we are working with electronic questionnaire. So most of the measurements basically and data obtainment is done. The patient doesn't need to come to the hospital for this. For example, for the filling up the questionnaires or making the PAD test, you receive the pads and then you send it by mail, and then they are measured at the hospital by the qualified team. So most of the, I would say, clinical trial burden is reduced and removed for our patients, because this was also very important for us to be a pleasure to take part in the trial and not a burden.
I think very often what happens recruiting patients and people for clinical trials, there's one sort of proviso that it must be made as easy as possible. Also logistically, I mean, for obvious reasons and all the other things. So I'll ask a very English Lancastrian question. Who pays for what?
We pay for everything.
Okay, so if that lady...
Not excluding, I mean, we cannot pay for someone to fly 8 times. For example, from the US, this would not be covered, but everything that is happening at the hospital, the treatments and materials, the bin that is given for the bladder diary, everything is covered by us.
I'm saying that because I think these are so common sense questions, but they don't always get answered, and people are a little bit hesitant sometimes because they think, well, it's going to cost me time, it's going to cost me my work, whatever it is, and who's going to pay. It's easy to if you get a simple answer, that's much easier. You say you're up to half recruitment now, so in practical terms, how many more people do you need, or do you want, or do you want us or any of us who are online here to do anything, or what?
We need approximately 40 more patients to complete the recruitment. And yeah, anyone you would know or you are able to make some advertisement to accelerate this recruitment, pardon me, would be helpful.
Yes, I think some of the people who are online now are probably taking all this in, and obviously we all have members and organizations and so on, but it's good to have the facts. I know they're very simple facts, but it's much easier to talk in plain, simple terms and say, well, this, and this, and the rest of it, of course, it's up to the individuals, but that sounds quite feasible to me. Anybody else got some questions? I don't know.
Deana,
Yeah.
can you supply us with a text, what the criteria are and what it is all about, so I can put it on our website?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So as there may be no further questions, I just want to point to the importance of patient organizations. We have a phase 1/2 study that we've just completed and published and presented at 2 major meetings, one in Vienna and one in Milan, most recently, Lynn, which you were present at.
Yeah.
And the data was received extremely well. It's encouraging data. Again, it's a phase 1, and now we're in the phase 2 we just discussed. But it's exceedingly important that patient organizations and patients such as this are follow us, are engaged, share this information with other patients and through word of mouth. I cannot emphasize this enough because, given the standard of care, physiotherapy and failure, there's great variability in the treatment effects and benefits of physiotherapy with nurses. It may be from 36 to up to 80%. There's variability in how it's practiced, country to country. And then we talked about, the step aids, which are temporary, including the bulking agents, which can only be given for a short duration of time. This is, we expect to be a durable long-term treatment. And at least two of the patients from the original line in our phase 1 study have seen a sustained benefit for 2 years. So it is truly remarkable. Now, again, I'll couch that these are small numbers. We hope to be able to replicate that in our phase 2 study, and also the follow-on that we'd hope to see over time. So I think if there are no more questions, Lynn and Margot, maybe we close with thanking you very much for hosting this week, and with many great industry sponsors, scientists, and most importantly, patients such as those on the phone.
Thank you very much. We'll do our bit and make sure that we get the recording out so that people can watch it later. And thank you very much. It's been most inspiring. Thank you. And bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.